Ladies and gentlemen, this RedGamingTech.com video, I'm going to be discussing PC gaming and why I love it. So, this topic has actually arisen because several people, various viewers, have written and asked me, well, why do I like PC gaming? I've mentioned a couple of times that I typically prefer it to consoles. Now, obviously, this is all opinion. I am not stating that, consoles are inferior or anything like that. This is just my personal opinions on why I prefer PC gaming, and also why I personally think that PC gaming is going to be a huge thing in the next few years or so. This is going to be the first part of this video. We're going to be dealing with a lot of the technical stuff in another video. This is just going to be primarily opinions based. So, PC gaming for quite a while, especially mid Xbox 360/PS3, was on a major slump, and it was actually quite difficult to really hang in there as a PC gamer, at least in my personal opinion. Ports from consoles were typically either lackluster and sloppy, or very slow to come about, and that's if they came about at all. A lot of the time they were either cancelled or delayed by months, and that's just a fact. And many analysts were predicting that consoles were becoming sufficiently advanced enough that PCs were going to become, a thing of the past, basically. And I personally hung in there. I still upgraded my PC, but I was playing a lot on my Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, I completely admit, and I loved it. I really did like console gaming. But I've always been one of those people who plays both PlayStation 3, consoles as well as PC. I always have been. I've loved both. I owned a Saturn, I've owned a Genesis, and I've owned even a Spectrum. I was really young at the time, but still, I've owned them. And personally, I think that the PC market now is starting to rally. Now, you can tell this by just how many ports there are of games. Games are starting to sell a lot better compared to how they used to traditionally on PC. The sales figures are going up and up and up, and this is a really good thing. You can see that a lot of Capcom games are being ported over. There's even a lot of fighting games now, which traditionally haven't really done that well in the PC marketplace. They've been fairly, I'm going to go with lackluster. They haven't sold that well. There have been issues with them. PC gamers haven't really been that interested in them. But fortunately, most PC games, in terms of fighting anyway, don't really require that much power to run, and therefore it's a pretty good deal for everyone involved. You've also got companies, of course, like Ubisoft and Electronic Arts, who are putting more money into PCs. However, to me, the best thing that's happened to PCs isn't the PC technology. It's not the better GPUs it's gone about. It's not the super powerful CPUs. It's not the massive amounts of memory that's available to users. It's not SSDs. It's not fast broadband. It's not even Steam. It's actually the next generation consoles. It's actually the Xbox One. It's actually the PlayStation 4. And I'll tell you why. It's their architecture. The very fact of the matter is that I think, despite the fact that a lot of PC gamers are going down on consoles and saying, the PS4, the Xbox One, they're not that powerful compared to PC, blah, blah, blah. I personally love the fact that they're both x86/64. It's pretty much my dream come true. I really hoped that this would be the case. As John Carmack said when he was initially talking a couple of months back at the QuakeCon conference, he mentioned that there were several ways they could have gone. They could have bunched up a ton of ARM cores. They could have gone the PowerPC route, or of course they could have gone x86/64. And I was praying that they really would go x86, because it just makes sense. The CPU architectures now have moved on sufficiently. ARM64 instructions aren't really to the point they need to be, quite honestly. And so it doesn't really work with addressing the amount of memory. Obviously, 4 gigs could have been arguable, but most people didn't really want that. Developers didn't want that. It was only 8 times. If you look at the jump from, say, the PS1 era to, say, the PS2 era, or the PS2 to the PS3, you'll notice that it's certainly a lot more than 8 times generally. basically 32 megabytes times 16 would be, of course, 512, and then if you times that by another 16 you get 8, and that's typically what developers want, you know, a significant jump forward. So it didn't really surprise me that console developers decided to go with 8 gigs of RAM. The memory configuration was a bit different to how I initially thought they would do it, but there you have it. And so I'm not really surprised about x86/64, but it's a major thing for PC gamers. And it means that the development systems that they're using, I'm talking about most developers, not all developers of course, each developer has their own, you know, methods and so on, but because of the emergence, the surge of indies, and I actually attribute a lot of this to the choice, the decision to go with x86/64. I'm going to call it 86 because it's a pain in the ass to keep saying 64 on top of that. But because of indies, because games costs in terms of the production has spiraled up and up and up and up and up, it becomes much more sensible, in my personal opinion, for developers to really push the x86 platform. And it also means that with the PlayStation 4 shader language, PSSL, the extensions with it, with C++, and which goes with, of course, the Radeon architecture, with the emergence of DirectX, and much better Linux support as well from developers with OpenGL. Because typically the PlayStation 4, from what we understand, a lot of games are going to be OpenGL based as well. It just so happens, in my personal opinion, that this is really good news, because it means that developers are going to be able to make a much better copies of PC games than they've ever done before. Already we've got comments from Battlefield 4 developers and Call of Duty Ghosts developers. Call of Duty has been one of those games that just hasn't really gone the whole hog on PC. It's not that it's bad. Of course you get the full 1080p. Of course you get slightly higher resolution textures, and of course you get some anti-aliasing, and you can put some texture filtering, and you've got, you know, the 60 frames per second plus gameplay, which is all great and, you know, fun. And of course you've got the keyboard and mouse controls, which in my personal opinion is much better for, you know, first-person shooters. I struggle really badly with analog. I know some people are really good on joypad with first-person shooters. Personally, I'm not one of them. I am bad. Like I even when I'm playing single player, I can generally do it if the, you know, AI is not super high. But I struggle. I really do. I think it's because mentally I'm used to the mouse and keyboard. Call of Duty Ghosts, however, developers have stated that we, PC gamers, are going to be getting better textures than the next generation console. Before anyone jumps on me on that, these aren't my words, these are the developers. So if you have issues, Google and, you know, write to the developers. And it's the same thing for Battlefield as well. They've said categorically the PC versions are going to look better. Not surprising, I don't have issues with that. Look, the bottom line is, people are going to, you know, yell, scream, laugh at PC gamers for spending more money. PC gamers are going to laugh at console gamers for, you know, less detail or whatever. But the thing is, they're two different systems, in my personal opinion. And here's the deal. My personal opinion on this, and this is, you know, my personal opinion, so there you have it. I don't think PC gaming is that expensive if you do it properly, as in you sell your old stuff at the right time. Preferably if you have a crappy graphics card, for example, to make do with. So, for example, let's assume you own graphics card A, and let's say crappy graphics card and graphics card A. Okay, so crappy graphics card is good enough for, you know, basic tasks, maybe very light gaming. And you've also got, like, you know, graphics card A, which is a very good GPU. So you've got graphics card A, and then graphics card B is coming out. The first thing you do is it a refresh or is it a complete new release? So in other words, is it going to give you 10-20% extra performance, or is it going to be something significant? If it's 10 or 20%, for example, a small refresh, an example of this would be, say, the GTX 480 to the GTX 580. It's not really that much of a big deal. The same as something like the GTX 80 to say the GTX 780, not really worth upgrading in my personal opinion. Sure, if you've got the money, but if not, why bother? However, let's say it is, say, the GTX 480 to say the GTX 680. Let's just use that as an example. So what you personally do, you sell your GTX 480, you put your crappy graphics card in, and then you get the new one. And it can be quite cheap. CPUs not too bad, and so you can get a pretty decent system for 500-600, depending on how much you want to spend, depending on what parts you've already got. For example, hard drives, power supply, case, whatever. Obviously, people are going to immediately say about monitor and stuff, but hey, I usually game on my TV personally, if I'm completely and utterly honest. But of course, all of this is horses for courses, and I understand that some people prefer console gaming. I do understand that it's a lot less fuss. But personally, I absolutely love PC gaming. I love the modability of the titles on it. I love the fact that, for example, Skyrim is very moddable. Obviously, there are certain titles that I'm a bit disappointed in. The new Amnesia, Machine for Pigs, could have been more customizable. I understand they're working on a way that allows you to import the assets into the Dark Descent. It's not ideal, but hey. There you have it. Of course, there is emulation on PC, but I'm not going to go into that in this video because of legality reasons. And so there you have that. There was also a lot of debate from, does Steam sales and sales on PC? Because obviously, I don't know if you've ever checked it out. It depends obviously if you're a PC gamer, but if you're a PC gamer, you'll know about Steam sales. And they're pretty damn infamous. I mean, they are just legendary on how much money you can save. No word of a lie. If you've got, like, I can only tell you in British pounds because that's how much I spend. So obviously your mileage may vary depending on the country you reside in. But I've got to tell you guys, if I spend about 80 to 100 Great British pounds, I've got so many games, I pretty much rock myself back and forth because I realize there's no way I can play all of those games. There are so many, and we're not talking like really old titles in some cases. Sure, you get a lot of repeats, but then you also get some pretty new ones, and the sales are really good because they come about pretty often. And so if you're not 100% certain about a game, you can wait for the sale and you're pretty golden. Fortunately, there are other avenues available as well, such as the Humble Bundle, which of course for the most part a lot of the games sold there are no DRM. I mean, the Electronic Arts Bundle that was just recently available, the Humble Bundle, I paid, I don't know, whatever amount, I've forgotten to be honest with you, but it was not that much. You could pay like $6 if you so desired. I think I paid like maybe 10 or 15, I don't remember exactly, but because I owned quite a few of the games already. But it was good to get some of the collection, but they did have titles like Battlefield 3. They had titles like Red Alert, Dead Space 3, and goodness knows what else. And I already owned Dead Space 3 and a couple of others. I didn't own Battlefield, if I'm honest, and there was one or two others. And then they threw in Red Alert, which I didn't know at the time they were going to do. But hey. And basically my point is it was really good. It gave me tons of games that, was really cool. So I do love that aspect of PC gaming. I think that PC gaming is going to keep moving forward. As I said, there was a time that PC gaming was on kind of like the brink. It was not doing well. And if you actually look at sales, like one of the things that a lot of people do is they'll look at the sales from traditional vendors, such as say Dell, and what tends to happen is that you'll notice that their sales are becoming crap. I wouldn't say awful, but they'll never completely die. Like, I don't think you'll ever see a day when PCs won't be in like an office, because it doesn't really make sense. Maybe, if cloud becomes a really big thing, maybe, in that sense, but other than that, it won't really happen. And, you're still going to get those vendors, but they're not selling as much to the average person. And the reason is because people are becoming far smarter now. You've got viewers such as yourselves and people such as yourselves who watch channels and they're becoming much more confident to build their own PCs and splurge out, and they're starting to go to, if they're not confident at building their own system, they'll ask their buddy, you know, hey John, can you help me build a system? Or, you know, hey Sarah, you know, you got your really nice system, you know, can you help me suggest a few parts to, you know, throw into mine? Or, you know, they'll go to their local computer shop that's not necessarily a large chain, or they'll order it off of like a certain website. I'm not going to mention anything because I don't, you know, want to give any favoritism to any companies or whatever, but you get the idea. And so you're starting to get a lot more discrete versions of the systems being sold, and that's really good news in my personal opinion. Indeed, there was an interview with the CEO of Runic Games, and he stated, and I quote, "We find that we get several 1,000% increase in units and revenues on the days of the Steam sale for Torchlight, and units are usually double the normal for a few weeks after the sales are over." Back in April of this year, PC gaming market brought in about $20 billion, which is huge. It's actually a full 8% growth. It's almost 10% from the year previous to that. And of course, some of this is because of titles like StarCrafts and Diablos and those games, but a lot of it is also to do with indies. It's also because developers now are starting to see, and the thing is, a lot of this stuff is self-fulfilling prophecy, right? In other words, if a developer sees a market is good, they are going to release games on that market because they know they're going to make money on it. It's not a particularly complicated, difficult business model, is it? It's like you see something selling well, you see that there's a good market in it, and you'll go for that market because you want to make money, which is understandable. I don't have problems with that. AMD, who of course have made the technology behind the PlayStation 4, behind the Xbox One. Of course, they're also the makers of the processors on a lot of, you know, customer level PCs, as well as GPUs. Of course, they're behind, say, the Radeon series. And they've even said that the thing is, it's very difficult to even say that you're porting a game to the PC now, or to the consoles. It's actually becoming very much just a case of changing a few bits and pieces. Now, obviously, the more work you put in, the better the port is going to be. That's the key word. But still, it's better than what it used to be. It's no longer basically having to rewrite half the game from scratch. It's no longer needing to worry. Instead, what you can do is that this is my own personal guess, based upon what developers have said, but it appears that most developers, studios who really want to make like good games anyway, as in like the ones best for each platform, they are going to be doing the following. They're going to take the PC version and they're going to make it shiny as possible, right? So whatever they do, within their budget constraints. Obviously, this is not La La Land. This is not a land where every person in the world has a very high-end PC. This is also not a world where you have unlimited budgets. So we're not going to be seeing situations where the PC graphics are, using a completely different engine with, which have been optimized for, Titans or something like that, SLI Titans, because that's not really feasible. What we are going to be seeing, however, is that developers are going to be looking to make games for the higher spec PCs, of course, but they're also going to be releasing that code and using that code as the basis for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One versions, and then tweaking it however they need to tweak it. So they can tweak the texture qualities, they can tweak, say, the level of details, they can tweak the resolutions, the internal resolutions it's running, they can tweak the frame rate, they can tweak, say, the draw distance, they can tweak whatever they need to do for their engine. That's the key word. Obviously, all of this is down to developers. That's not to take anything away from the PlayStation 4. That's not to take anything away from the Xbox One. You've got to remember that these consoles are going to last us, however, a long time. And so, I think that PCs, of course, are going to start to push away more and more and more. But I think that for the most part, I am really happy with the direction the console gaming has gone. I'm very happy with the x86-64 nature with it. I think PC gaming is going to benefit hugely for it. But I love PC gaming because to me it just feels more natural. I love the fact that the games are cheaper. Admittedly, I do somewhat offset that by, you know, buying a piece of hardware, but you know what, I'm pretty good with that actually. I love the fact the games are cheaper. I love the fact that there's so many little free titles that you can just pick up and, you know, try out. I like the fact that there's mods available, especially for games like Skyrim. And even little issues and fixes, sometimes it can be very frustrating. There can be instances where games just don't work how they should. There can be frame rate drops, there can be issues with a certain graphics card. 99.9% of the time, it's been patched. I don't think I've ever had a game, personally, like a really big release, that I've not been able to play at some point. You know, it might take a week, it might take 2 weeks for something to get fixed. I've been very vocal on, I think it was Arkham City, not Asylum, Arkham City. I mean, that had massive issues with DX11 implementation. You could play it with DX9, but it wasn't ideal, because obviously it didn't look as pretty. It missed, I think it was tessellation, and obviously some physics and some other stuff as well. But you could play it, but I just decided just to basically soldier it on DX11, even though I was getting crappy frames per second compared to what it should have, and then they optimized it and it was all great and wonderful. My point being that for the most part you can kind of muddle through, you can Google, and it's not ideal, but hey, it's, you know, one way to go. And I also really like the fact that for the most part, you know, indie title, not even indie titles, but small, you know, small groups of skilled people can sometimes put out really fantastic work, or they could fix some major issues. There have been issues with games such as Vampire Bloodlines, I think it is. I always get the two mixed up. I can't never remember if it's Masquerade or Bloodlines. I think it's Bloodlines. Had some major balance patch issues, and you know, basically some fans have basically fixed the title. Even Skyrim, I know I've been really vocal about this, but I hate lockpicking in Skyrim. I do. I detest it. I don't think it's fun. I think it's just an annoying element. And so I love the fact that you can get like little third-party mods to help you with that. That's just my own personal opinion on how I play the game, of course. I also love the fact that you can get stuff such as, you know, user mods, which allow you to, you know, get your own ships or living arrangements or whatever. And I do love that stuff. I love the flexibility of it all. So, I do love the user mods. I do love the flexibility of PC gaming. I do understand, however, it is not for everyone. Some people just don't have the time, the will to, say, update drivers or to do whatever. I think it's becoming a lot less of a big deal now, at least in my personal opinion. I think that back in the days of like Windows XP, for example, it could have been an issue. Even before that, it was huge, but now it's becoming less and less and less of a big deal. As long as typically you update your drivers, most big games work instantly. And so it's really a case of, as long as you've got a good enough system to run the game to a reasonable degree, then you're not really going to have that much difficulty, especially if you're willing to do a little bit of tinkering, overclocking and so on. But even overclocking, for example, is so much easier than it used to be. Back in the really early days of overclocking, most of it was done with actual physical kind of mini switches on the motherboard. That was kind of a pain in the ass, but now it's becoming a hell of a lot easier. BIOSes and so on are pretty much set up to be able to do so, and even to be honest with you, when I'm overclocking most systems now, I don't even do that much manual work. I should, but it's just not really worth it. I typically just, if it's for CPU overclock, I'll just do a bit of Googling on some base settings to start off with, and then I'll just experiment for a couple of hours, maybe at most. And, you know, once you've invested that time, it's done. It's set up for life, unless you have like a major hardware problem, which is unlikely. And as long as you write down your settings, even then, it's not that big of a deal. Same with GPU graphics card. You know, for the most part, I personally just ramp it up 10% initially, and then just go from there, and it's not really that big of a deal. And to be honest with you, if you've got a medium to high-end GPU anyway, it's pretty much going to make mincemeat out of most games, because, let's face it, a lot of cards now, they're actually built for, like, dual and triple monitor displays. like the high-end Radeon cards, for example, or GeForce cards, they're actually meant for tri-screens, and so even the medium to high-end cards, they could play most games without any difficulty at 1080p and most settings at max. Obviously, certain games like Crysis 3, you might have to skimp a little bit on anti-aliasing. But even an old card, like my older graphics card, the one before I got this one, the GTX 480, it was more than capable of playing 1080p on most games. I sometimes had to maybe smidgen down the details a little bit, turn down anti-aliasing. But if I was willing to do that, even that card, and it's pretty old, by gaming standards, like, I don't know, 3 years, whatever, 4 years old, it was still capable of pretty much destroying most stuff out there easily. So, obviously, all of this is personal opinion. I'm not saying that PC gaming is superior to consoles, because I don't really think one is better than the other. I honestly don't. I think that I prefer PC gaming, but a preference is not saying that it's better. A preference is just saying something that you personally enjoy more or find more natural. On the other hand, I wouldn't personally ever give up console gaming either. I love console gaming, and certain games, in my personal opinion anyway, I don't know why, I just don't like playing them on PC. I don't really like playing fighting games on PC. I have no idea why. You can either get pretty much the same controls, I just don't like it. I don't really know why that is. Maybe it's because typically online competition on PC isn't so good as, consoles. I prefer, generally speaking, third-person type of action games or horror games, especially on console. I'm talking like Resident Evil type of games. Not necessarily all the time. Obviously, it depends on the type of game, but it becomes less of an issue if you're using a joypad, for example, and you're, happen to be on a reasonable screen size. Anyway, as I said, this is all opinion, so feel free to disagree with me, feel free to give me your reasons why you agree with me, whatever makes you happy. I'm going to get going for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.